All you could see was a wall of flame as we got into the ticket area. It was thick black smoke. You could feel the amount of heat down there, and it was absolutely incredible. And it was as though the whole of the ticket area was alight. Suddenly, right in front of me was a guy waving about on the floor. And because we'd had water, we'd obviously put him out without knowing it. And basically his shirt was burnt off him, his trousers were burnt off him, and all he had was bits of tatters of shirt, like his collar and his cuffs. And he was laying on his front in very, very distressed state.
"200 firefighters fought the blaze at London's King's Cross tube station. 31 people were killed, including one fireman. This was the most dangerous kind of fire to tackle, an underground inferno. For the firefighters, it was like going down a giant chimney. They wore breathing apparatus and protective clothing, which enabled them to survive in 1,000-degree heat and thick toxic smoke. Greater safety for firefighters has been a long struggle. Lessons have been learned from the past and paid for with the lives of earlier generations of firefighters. Back in the 1950s, firemen took pride in going into the heart of the fire. Often with no more protection than their woolen tunics and cork helmets. But a huge London fire in 1958 was to change the way fires were fought.
In Smithfield Meat Market, firemen from most of London's 58 stations fought the worst underground fire ever known in the capital. The fire broke out in the underground storage cellars of the poultry market and raged fiercely.
This fire was to teach the brigade lessons it has never forgotten. The smoke-filled tunnels beneath the market took the lives of 2 firemen and dealt a death blow to the idea that to be a good fireman, you had to be a smoke eater.
It was an idiot's job, really, but I mean, that's the way things were. And smoke eaters were people who could really take a lot of punishment. I mean, a lot of them died for it, but I mean, that's the way it was. I mean, that's the way the system ran. There was only one way to deal with a fire, and that was to go in after it. If the enemy was in there, you went in after it.
He's a good smoke-eating officer was an expression you would often hear, amongst other less complimentary expressions that you might have heard. But it wasn't meant to be derogatory in any way. It was an accolade.
Nothing clever in it, but everybody was. You got to know the name as a good fireman. He could take a bit of smoke, and that was all it is. But you don't get no medals for it because eventually it affects your lungs. But there was no smoke eaters that day. No one could have survived in there, smoke eaters.
Over the years, the cork-lined walls of the poultry market's tunnels had become soaked in meat fat. As the fire took hold, it gave off a thick, deadly smoke.
You see this acrid black smoke, not to say acrid, it was black smoke at the time. It was coming up the pavement flaps as thick as Newgate knocker. So thick that the fireman, he walked onto it, went into there, got on the ladder, he disappeared. And he wasn't down the hole, he disappeared in the smoke. And that's how thick it was.
The fire developed rapidly, and there were fears that it would break through from below and into the market above. The firemen had no choice. They had to don what was then specialist gear, breathing apparatus or BA sets.
The set itself was an oxygen set, and it's what they called a recirculatory oxygen set, which meant that you breathed the same oxygen over and over again. It consisted of a large bag on the front that you wore on the front of the body, with a cylinder on the back, lower down in the middle of the back, and a valve group on your left-hand side. And what happened was that you breathed in pure oxygen. You breathed that out into the bag. It circulated from the front of the bag, I think, to the back, through the protosorb, which absorbed the carbon dioxide. It then mixed with new oxygen, and you breathed it again. And so it went on and on and on.
These proto-oxygen sets worked well enough, but they were used with few safety checks. There was no warning when the oxygen was about to run out, and no record of the first crews who went down to search for the seat of the fire. The firemen had no maps of the maze of tunnels, and they were blinded by the dense smoke. They had to move with extreme care.
To feel your way, you use the back of your hand. If you use the front of your hand and you touch anything that's red hot, or you touch an electric point, your hand will do that and grab, and you can't get it off. Whereas if you're using the back of your hand, the hand can't do that. It's impossible. Of course, you've got to do the BA shuffle, as it's called. And you move your feet along in case there's a big hole there.
As more and more crews arrived at Smithfield, it was realised that 2 of the first men to go underground had not returned.
Someone come to me and said, "Have you seen Dick Stocking?" So I said, "No, he's with you lot, isn't he?" So they said, one of the ET crews. So they said, "Well, no, we haven't seen him. He went in with Fort Wells." So I asked around if anybody'd seen either Fort Wells or Dick Stocking, and they hadn't. So I went and saw Mr. Shawyer and told him I thought that we were 2 men in trouble.
We was informed that there was 2 men missing. That was Station Officer Fort Wells and Fireman Stocking, God bless them. And the blokes, quite a few blokes being carried out unconscious. And now you start to get, not second thoughts, but you make sure your straps are right, because there's already 2 gone, and there's thick as old nougat's knocker, and now you're making sure that your set's right. And you keep looking at your pressure gauge to make sure you got enough atmospheres in there.
And so we now started to do a search for them. And crews were going down. I took a crew down. I got rigged in a sec, went down below with my crew.
The fire was coming down a tunnel like an express train. And the thing, you couldn't see it, you could hear it, and you could feel it, because it was coming down above your head in the tunnels. And it was all this cork installation that was burning. And you could hear woof, woof, as it come down. You thought, where'd that coming from?
When you're going down a corridor that's got stacks and stacks of meat there, you know, lambs, every stack feels exactly the same as any other stack with your hands. You think, so, well, did I go 50 paces? Did I go 100 paces? You don't know, you see.
And you're shuffling along, and you're feeling with the back of the hands and shoveling with your feet, and then you hear this whoosh whoosh, and you can feel the heat on your face, and you get on the floor now, become very humble. And then you're on your hands and knees, and you've got the branch coming up, and you've got the water coming out, but you can't see what you're hitting. You couldn't even hear what you was hitting, because the tunnels were so long. And as I say, then the old bottle begins to go. In other words, you think to yourself, this is the time I wasn't here, but you can't leave because you're the man next to you.
So we worked our way through, and I heard someone behind me saying they'd found somebody. And I thought that what they'd found is both of the firemen. But no, they'd only found one, which was Fort Wells. And then I went on a bit further, and all of a sudden I found some meat that had been pulled down. And I thought there's something wrong somewhere, and I felt amongst it. And of course, I found Dick Stocking. I mean, I knew I'd found him because he was the only car because they had clothes on, if you see what I mean. What he'd done, and working his way back, he's missed the opening. And now he's in real trouble. And when his set was getting to the time when he knew he was going to go down, I presume panic setting.
Tragedy strikes early. 2 firemen lose their way in the labyrinth and are dead from the fumes before their colleagues can find them.
With 2 men dead and the conditions worsening, the search for the seat of the fire was abandoned. An attempt to flood the basement ended in failure. The water drained away onto a nearby tube line, causing electrical problems. Eventually, the fire broke through from the basement and engulfed the market in flames.
It was a total and utter chaos. There were people everywhere, there was equipment everywhere, there was hose that appeared to be running round and round in ever-decreasing circles. There were people moving in every direction. They were being marched, or they were sitting slumped against walls with their breathing apparatus off, black and filthy and obviously tired.
By nightfall, the battle to save the building was all but lost.
In a burst of smoke and flame, one of the towers of the poultry market crashes down. The whole of the building up to the roof is a mass of fire. For the burning basement is far bigger than the market, and this is the only outlet for the flames, which roar upwards through it like an inverted funnel.
Over 4 days and nights, Smithfield Poultry Market was razed to the ground. The efforts of 1,000 firemen had been in vain. For the London Fire Brigade, that was a defeat, as well as a tragedy which had taken the lives of 2 respected and experienced men.
The fire broke out into the air, and Smithfield Towers came down, 100 feet in the air. The greasy flames leapt high. From Clerkenwell to London Bridge, we saw them in the sky. From every London fire brigade, they came to fight the flames. 1,000 firemen heroes. We did not know all their names, but 2 men died, and 2 wives cried. 3 young children too. Remember them and all the men who fight the fires for you.
One of the things that the fire service had always prided itself upon up until then was that it was safe, that it knew what it was doing, that its procedures were tried and tested, and the men who used them were skillful or were accompanied by skillful men. So I think it came as something as a blow that those men were lost in the way they were. But what it did make us do was to look more thoroughly at the procedures that we had for knowing where men were in those sorts of conditions.
A service that deals in disaster learns the hardest lessons when the disaster overwhelms it. It was as a direct result of Smithfield that a new tally system was introduced so that all crews had to leave a record of when they went into a smoke-filled building. And instead of guessing when their oxygen was running out or trying to read the gauge in thick smoke, a warning whistle sounded. New compressed air BA sets were brought in from the mid-1970s. They're safer and easier to use and are now standard equipment for firefighters. Guide ropes were brought in so that firefighters can retrace their steps in large fires. 30 years after Smithfield, a fire at London's King's Cross Underground station was to test these safety measures to the full and to reveal fresh weaknesses.
I was actually riding the back of our pump, and we'd been out on a hydrant inspection. We had just come down Regent Street, and I think it was 1934 was the time of call. It was over the radio, to an escalator alight at the King's Cross Underground.
We knew there was a couple of crews already down there, so normally it's just a small extinguisher and it's out. As we're getting off the backs, our driver started shouting about there was some, there's a few wisps of smoke and we could have a job here. So I stopped, and next thing you know, bang, just like that, there was just black smoke punching out of every entrance.
You just heard this horrible screaming noise from the underground, and it was just hundreds of people screaming all at the same time. And within half a second, there was people coming out the underground with this thick black smoke.
Just as the evening rush hour was finishing, a small fire on a wooden escalator had suddenly erupted across the booking hall in a fireball. Within seconds, 31 people were dead, killed by the blast of superheated toxic fumes. One of the dead was a fireman who'd gone in to investigate. Steve Bell and Dave Priestman were in the first crew to enter the station after the flashover.
I actually ran down the stairs into the underground, and it was, but even within seconds, the whole of that tunnel was completely thick black smoke. There was hordes of people running towards me.
And this just bloke coming on just fell on top of us. His hair was alight, his shirt, his trousers, everything, the whole lot of him was alight. Managed to pat most of them out, passed them on to another crew. They helped out as well, and we carried on.
We started to proceed along towards the ticket area. We couldn't actually see anything. And by now the heat was absolutely incredible. The flames were actually coming across our heads, so we had to get right, lay down on the floor with the branch open. By the time we'd been down there about 5 minutes, I actually thought my ears were melting. They felt like they was melting off the side of my head.
There was one body on the right-hand side, which was, near enough nothing left of it. The actual body has shrunk. Just looked at it and carried on.
And there was an iron shutter gate that had been partially pulled across. And as we reached there was a pile of bodies that they obviously trying to panicking to get out the ticket area, had run into the gate, and they just piled up there. There was at least 5, maybe more.
The first crews to go in were struggling to reach the seat of the fire at the escalator. There was a way into King's Cross which would have allowed firefighters to put out the blaze from below in relative safety. But in the confusion, it wasn't found. With temperatures hitting 1,000 degrees, the firefighters, just like at Smithfield, had to work their way down what was in effect a huge chimney.
The biggest problem was trains were still running. Although they were now no longer stopping at King's Cross, as they were coming into the station, they was forcing a nice load of fresh oxygen up the escalators to the ticket area, and it was acting like a blast furnace. So 1 minute it's thick black smoke, and as soon as the train comes in, gives a nice fresh load of oxygen, forces the smoke out past us, so it pushes more heat onto us. And everything in the ticket area was just bright red. There was metal ticket barriers burning, and you could actually see the flames coming off them.
The searing heat of King's Cross was starting to show up flaws in fire service equipment. The compressed air sets weren't lasting as long as expected, and the firefighters were cut off from command and control. They had no radios which worked underground. Control knew when the 2 men had gone in, but they couldn't know that their air was running out early.
I was running low on air, And all I could think was, if I shut this branch down, we ain't going to live. So we couldn't leave the jet, so we had to keep the jet open, because we would never have made it out. The heat would just got us. And I was just on the verge of collapse when 2 firefighters that had carried the chap out earlier managed to make their way back down with a hose reel.
And all of a sudden I got the old tap on the shoulder, and I thought, oh, thank God for that. Someone's come to relieve me. It's one of the, another Soho bloke. So I started moving back down the hose. To find your way out again, you know, you follow the hose back. Sensible.
And I actually had to follow the hose out because you just couldn't see where you was going. Followed the hose out, and by the time I got to the stairs leading out, my whistle was actually, low air whistle was actually sounding.
Steve Bell was still down in the ticket hall. When a ticket machine exploded right next to him, he dropped the hose and was immediately lost in the dense smoke. In their rush to get at the fire, neither firefighter had taken in guide ropes.
I started thinking, okay, like, gotta get yourself out of here. You know, you lost the hose, but don't worry about it. Let's find a way out. And I just started using my eye. I started trying to find pinpoints of light, anything that might give me a clue. And I picked up a torch, someone's torch in the distance. So I started moving towards it. I thought, if that's a fireman, if that's a torch, it's got to be a fireman. So if he's a fireman, he must have a hose. If he's got a hose, I'm going to find my way back, no problem. So I started moving along, and all of a sudden, something smacked me in the head. It was a banister. You know, absolutely black, you know, like burnt to hell. And then I saw the small body, which I'd originally seen when I first come in. And I thought, great, these are the stairs. And as soon as I realised these were stairs out, that's it, and like a shot. And I got out the entrance, I come in, and just I took like 2 steps, the old ran out of oxygen. Just ran out of my set.
In the 2 hours it took to get the King's Cross fire under control, many firefighters were injured. Questions were raised about why the entrance from below wasn't found, why the firefighters didn't have radios that worked underground, and why protective equipment such as their gloves melted. And questions were raised about the death of an experienced and respected fire officer.
In the meanwhile, we'd been bringing out the burnt bodies on salvage sheets, wrapping them up, putting them on the stretchers so the ambulance crews could take them to a makeshift mortuary. And we was assembled by the control unit, and we was told that our station officer had died as a result of the fire.
Station officer Colin Townsley was caught off guard without his breathing apparatus when he went in to investigate what appeared to be a smouldering escalator. At the time, this was common practice when there was no obvious sign of fire. The inquiry declared Townsley's death was heroic. He was found next to the body of a badly burnt woman whom he was trying to lead to safety. After King's Cross, rules were tightened and improved equipment brought in. The fire service learnt new lessons, and firefighting became a little bit safer.
It's only when something goes fundamentally wrong, as they did at Smithfield and they did at King's Cross, that we realise that the hierarchy of the service in general, is itself becoming complacent. I fear no fire service willingly places its men or the public at risk. It's only when the omissions and inadequacies of the provisions are dramatically revealed that the inward look that's required takes place.
Next Monday at 9, Rescue examines how the emergency services tackled the Clapham rail disaster, compared with that of Harrow 30 years earlier. The book of the series is in bookshops. Price £16.99.